Welcome to ClearPath Retirement Planning Podcast. I'm Kathy, and today we're going to do something a little different. This episode is going to be a pure listener Q&A. Joining me are Stewart and Mitch, the advisors behind ClearPath. Guys, thanks for being here.
Hey, everybody. Glad to be here.
Yeah, welcome back.
Question number one. At what point should someone really start getting serious about retirement planning? Is there a magic number of years out?
So ideally, what we like to see here is for people that are kind of in that 10-year window. 10 years is ideal. It gives us lots of time to really go through the planning process and you know, I would say that this mental change from this grow my assets, pure growth mode to now I'm not putting money in anymore and I'm starting to spend that money is a very difficult transition to make. So the sooner you start to talk about this stuff, the sooner you start to really plan out this transition, the better. Doesn't mean that there's ever a you missed it kind of window, but 10 years is great. I would say that, you know, it's never too late.
Okay, next question. So everyone wants to know this question. How much money do I actually need to retire?
That's
Who's answering that one?
I'll give it a shot. You know, Kathy, that's a great question. And there's a couple rules of thumb that have been tossed around the industry for a long time, but things are just more complicated than ever right now. What people generally hear is there's a withdrawal rule from all your assets that you built up. It's either 3 or 4%, depending on what you've heard, right? But it's much more complicated than that. There's so many factors that, again, I always say are introduced when you retire that weren't really around when you're in the accumulation years. Things like Social Security, Medicare, things like RMDs, where you have to take money out and pay taxes on pre-tax money. And the other big factor is you have to think about expenses. You'll see online, you need to have $2 million, you need to have $1 million, you need to have whatever figure to retire. But it's so relative to what you spend. You could have a couple who spends $2,000 a month and lives off their Social Security and doesn't really want to travel much. Or you could have people who want to spend $10,000 to $15,000 a month and want to take 4 or 5 trips every year. So it's so relative to your goals. It's so relative to what income sources you have. It's so relative to, do you have a pension? Do you have a large Social Security? Are you going to receive an inheritance? This is probably the most common question Stuart and I see in the office is, do I have enough, right? Do I have enough saved? And, you know, we can sit there and model through that. We can sit there and say, okay, here's your income. Here's what income sources you have. Here's where the assets are at now. What can we do to reach the number that we want to get to? And then once we get to whatever number that is, how do we maximize that? How can we be the most tax efficient? How can we stretch that out through retirement and live that full, richer retirement?
Yeah. I think if you're going to talk about rules of thumb here, I don't like any of them,
right,
but my favorite, if we were going to have to pick, would be this 25 times your annual spending need. But I think that's probably going to give you at least some sort of rule of thumb here. And let's say, you know, you're living off of Social Security and a pension, or you're living off Social Security and you need to access $25,000 of after-tax money every year on top of whatever income sources you have, whether it be Social Security or pensions. And if you look at that, you know, 25,000 times 25 years would be in that neighborhood of about 625,000. You've got to also put that into perspective. That's after-tax money. In order to have 25,000 a year after tax, you'd actually need quite a bit more than 625 if it's in pre-tax accounts like IRAs, because you're going to have to share that with the government. But yeah, I think that's a decent rule of thumb there to say if your spending need in addition to your income sources was another 25,000 that you needed to access from investments, that would need to be about 625,000 if it was 25,000 a year.